So it's a channel called Killer Chronicles, and they have a feature on our boy, the crybaby killer, Saul. He's probably salty at how we view who he is and what he did as far as kidnapping old ladies, man. Are you the bottom of the barrel? No, but close. Bottom of the barrel, you know what that's about. So he's not quite there. I mean, he's there in the sense that, he'll arrest your grandmother and then have your grandmother call him for ransom money and then charge her this ransom money for the rest of her life. Like, it's some bottom of the barrel shit. Killer Chronicles did a video on it. I haven't seen the whole thing. I'm going to watch it with y'all, see if there's anything new that this piece of content can bring to the table as far as the story that we know. We'll see if they uncovered anything that we didn't know already. I look forward to that kind of information. I want to know new things. Sometimes you find something new, but that new thing is just something that was added through the telephone game, and it's not even legit. You got to vet those things too.
Imagine you are walking through a big American city. You pass a homeless man with a shopping cart on the sidewalk. But in the blink of an eye, everything changes. Suddenly, you've been placed in a bear hug and dragged backwards into a van where two others are waiting. They hog-tie you and duct tape your eyes shut, then take you to a secluded area where you are informed that you will only be released if one of your loved ones is able to cough up hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash or property.
This doesn't just go for hustlers and dealers. This goes for the young lady on the street, the older gentleman walking his dog, the dude that's on his phone arguing with his girl as he walks with his head down, the dude sitting in the car rolling the blunt, the dude sitting in the car going through his emails. I don't know how it is for anybody else, anywhere else, you know what I'm saying? But sitting in your car, not paying attention, head not on a swivel, that's the type of thing that gets you done with and done quick. So be aware where you at. Be aware that people like Saul exist. People worse than Saul exist. Saul was looking for this big paper, right? There's a dude that'll do this to you for $15 to heal himself. So ladies, gentlemen, everybody, pay attention.
For dozens of people living in the Chicago area during the early 2000s, this scenario became a disturbing reality. For years, a group of elite professional kidnappers operated in secret, targeting members of the city's underworld who were thought to be untouchable. Some victims were tortured, others were murdered. Almost all were treated like property, kept in a desolate area for days without bathroom breaks while the ransoms were being negotiated. But time and again, something curious happened.
He said, you put in a desolate spot, you can't use the bathroom, you can't take a shower, you can't do this, you're denied good food, you're denied nourishment. Sounds like the same jail that they put J&P in.
Just when all hope seemed lost, the very same rich benefactor stepped up to pay the kidnappers off and save the day.
For those that didn't cover the story with us, it was a different kind of scam. It wasn't the regular, kidnap for ransom scam. It was, I'm going to snatch up somebody that I know. They're going to know that I'm the only dude that got enough money to get them. They're going to reach out to me. When they reach out to me, I'm going to say, yeah, man, I'm going to rescue you. I'm going to pay your ransom. We're going to walk off into the sunset together. And then you're going to pay me whatever that ransom was for the rest of your life until you're done paying it off and then some. Now, you think about that with having a team of dudes that's willing to go the extra mile and do dirt. And then you put that also with the fact that you have police help. It's a whole different deal. That's a long game scam right there.
The victims were so grateful that they signed over their homes, turned over hundreds of kilos of cocaine, or paid him back in full in cash after gaining their freedom. The story behind this mysterious group would eventually be brought to the surface, and in the process, expose secrets of Chicago's lucrative...
That dude will get the ransom out of you, right? Let's just say you're not a person that's going to pay for the rest of your life, right? You're a dude that wants to knock it out in one go round, right? So, he gets you out the basement. They get you some Wendy's. You eat, you feel better. You get a hold of your money that nobody had access to, and you pay him back in full. And then y'all go on as friends. This dude rescued you. He's your savior, your salvation. That's another thing. He wasn't just, I'll give you $10,000 for the ransom and save you, and you give me $10,000 back. Nah, he was putting a vig on it too. So they were paying a premium for their own rescue. But imagine that you pay him in full, and now that's it. We're friends again. I don't know nothing about it. We hanging out. It's crazy, dog. The audacity.
Drug trade, corruption in law enforcement, and shocking betrayals that called into question the true value of friendship among thieves. Today's story starts on July 8th, 1999. at an apartment complex on West New York Street in Aurora, Illinois. It was on this date and place that a Chicago narco cop named Glen Lewellyn arrested Refugio Cortez Ruiz for allegedly having 10 kilograms of cocaine, after he alone spotted Refugio possessing the drugs, while a police surveillance team surrounded the complex in which he lived.
I mean, you can't beat that when you got a partner like Lewellyn. You good.
Refugio would loudly proclaim his innocence throughout the court process. But as a star witness at the trial, Lewellyn would testify that he observed Refugio Cortez Ruiz poke his head out from an apartment as if he was expecting company, and eventually emerged with a duffel bag that turned out to be full of cocaine. Ruiz Cortez insisted that he'd been framed, that the drugs had been planted on him, but most people who heard this story wrote it off as the excuse of a man who was desperate to escape responsibility after being caught red-handed.
And that's the problem, because even an innocent man, we're going to look at him like he's guilty. Even if the man is innocent, we're going to look at him like he's guilty because we're used to people lying. The carousel that the world spins on is people not believing a person that's telling the truth because there's so many liars in this world. Whether he had 5 keys and they called it 10, it's still a lie.
He was convicted and sentenced to 17 and a half years in federal prison. A decade would go by before anyone in law enforcement entertained the possibility that Ruiz Cortez had actually been telling the truth.
Damn, boy.
What few people
10 years. Sheesh.
Knew at the time was that 3 years earlier, in 1996, Officer Glen Lewellyn had signed a secret cooperation agreement with a confidential informant, whose work with the Chicago police was paying big dividends, both figuratively and literally. He was the man who tipped Lewellyn off about drugs at Refugio's apartment, and he likely made $10,000 from this information. Within Chicago police sealed records, this secret informant's name was Bill Pager. To those on the streets, he was...
If you want to make a movie about dude, if you want to tell a dirtbag story like this, right? Which is, it is an amazing concept for a TV show or a movie, right? A dude like Saul and a cop like Lewellyn. It's an amazing concept for a film, right? You want to get everybody involved, you just call the show Bill Pager. That's it. Everybody's going to wonder what the hell that's about. They're going to come check it out and they're going to find this dirtbag ass story for real.
Was known by his real name, Saul Rodriguez.
Muppet.
And despite his young age, he was fast making a name for himself as a charmer with a knack for networking and earning huge amounts of cash by selling major weight. Saul was a Chicago native who knew his way around the city's drug trade better than most. At just 21, he'd been busted with 13 pounds of marijuana and $8,000 in cash. And it was Officer Glen Lewellyn who slapped the handcuffs on him.
Daddy.
Lewellyn grew up in New Lenox, Illinois, and worked construction in his 20s. But when he joined Chicago police in 1986, it was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. By 1996, as Saul was a rising drug dealer, Lewellyn was an up-and-coming narcotics officer. And in a place like Chicago, that meant he had his work cut out for him. Saul's arrest offered a drug cop like Lewellyn a good opportunity to break into the world of drug trafficking from the inside, and Lewellyn immediately worked to put the squeeze on Saul. With Saul still handcuffed in the back, they drove in Lewellyn's patrol car to one of Saul's stash houses, where police were actively searching. The two watched the officers from afar, as Saul pondered whether he'd rather go to prison for whatever they were about to find in his apartment, or go a different route. 3 weeks later, Saul made his choice official.
He didn't know that that was his payday. He didn't know that he was going to be the highest paid cop in the history of the Chicago Police Department at this point.
He signed a cooperation agreement with Lewellyn, establishing that Saul would provide information on local drug traffickers to Lewellyn on a rolling basis. He wasn't working for free. His new supervisor assured him that he'd be paid $1,000 per kilogram of cocaine the police seized. Of course, the agreement said that Saul had to obey the law and cease all unauthorized drug dealing activities.
Sure.
Instead, he saw his newfound status as a paid government informant to simply turn in the competition while continuing to sell drugs like never before. Now, he'd make money from kilos of cocaine seized by narcs like Lewellyn, while also making cash hand over...
So basically, he ended up with the amount of power as compared to what the cartels got. The cartels got the power to have the police come, do their raids, get their enemies, do all of this stuff. But he started doing that on this side with just the smallest amount of power. He had himself a little cop brigade, turned it into a tactic. Crazy.
Fist through selling cocaine in large quantities all over town. It was a kind of deal that allowed someone to evolve from a kid who'd grown up around gangs in Chicago's back-of-the-yards neighborhood into a high roller with plenty of cash to burn and invest. But just 7 months into his work as a paid snitch, one of Saul's drug couriers was busted with 15 pounds of marijuana by the DEA, who had been secretly working with the mechanic Saul had hired to install secret compartments inside his courier cars. Once again, he could have ended up in prison if not for Glen Lewellyn, who made a quick call to DEA Special Agent Al Dosher and got the investigation tabled.
Just a quick call.
With
Just
that,
make a quick
he
call
realized
real
that he had
quick.
something that few drug pounds of marijuana by the DEA,
You make a quick call and you knock it off the DEA's table. Officer Lewellyn.
who had been secretly working with the mechanic Saul.
Who I also say the judge freed him on some, you watch my back, I watch yours.
Had hired to install secret compartments inside his courier cars. Once again, he could have ended up in prison if not for Glen Lewellyn, who made a quick call to DEA Special Agent Al Dosher and got the investigation tabled. With that, he realized that he had something that few drug dealers ever experience: immunity from the law. And if there's ever a place where a drug dealer could use legal immunity to thrive, it's Chi-Town. While every metropolitan area in the United States is of course a major drug market, Chicago is uniquely situated. It is a central nervous system for numerous important freeways, railroads, ports, and a major airport. 70% of the US population, as well as the Mexico border, rests within 1 day's drive from Chicago. Inside the city itself are an estimated 100,000 gang members who may be willing and eager to make a living peddling drugs.
I say 200,000, 250.
In whatever form they can. The U.S. Department of Justice has consistently ranked Chicago as either the #1 or #2 destination of America's most used imported narcotics, like heroin, cocaine, or marijuana. It should be no wonder, then, that the notorious drug lord and head of the Sinaloa cartel, Joaquin Lorea, better known as El Chapo, referred to Chicago as his, quote, home port. After all, the city helped to make him a billionaire, and two of its most famous residents, brothers named Margarito and Pedro Flores, played a major role in this. Known as the Twins, the Flores brothers ultimately went from ultra-rich coke dealers to snitches whose testimony proved crucial for sending El Chapo to the most secure prison on American soil. But in the early 2000s, they were cocaine entrepreneurs and responsible for the distribution of 1 to 2 tons of cocaine every single.
The brothers were a key cog in an international network, taking delivery of about 2 tons of brocaine each month, as well as large quantities of heroin between 2005 and 2008, authorities said.
Month. That kind of weight will earn you just as many friends as enemies. And one of the guys on their lengthy list of friends was Saul Rodriguez himself. Like the Flores brothers, Saul was becoming a millionaire as well, but he had Chicago's public coffers just as much as the cocaine powder to thank for it. Another one of Saul's close friends was Juan Lewellyn, aka Baby G, and their bond was so strong they'd made a pledge to never sleep with a woman who the other had dated. Unfortunately, Lewellyn allegedly
Listen, if you gotta make that pledge, there's already a doubt, there's already an insecurity in you, all right? Now, I'm sure he probably just said it for the sake of saying it in his statement or whatever, but if you gotta go through that and you gotta make a pact with your homie that you're gonna smash none of his chicks, he's not gonna smash none of yours, there's something wrong there. Saul Rodriguez related in his grand jury statement that Juan Lewellyn was dating his ex-girlfriend, Janet B. He had 1 child with her. Prior to that time, he had been best friends with Baby G. They had an understanding that they would never date the same woman. They had an understanding, huh? They had a lot of insecurities. That's what they had.
Broke this pact by having sex with the mother of Saul's kid, and it angered Saul so much that he set out for revenge. In October 1999, he asked Glen Lewellyn what would have to happen for someone to go to jail for a long time. Shortly thereafter, Lewellyn was arrested by a Chicago PD squadron with 2 kilograms of cocaine.
But so he set him up. How can you go to jail for a long time? Set him up with your boy Lewellyn with 2 keys of brocaine and get him out of there.
Lewellyn's stint in jail was a brief one. He quickly paid bail and was back out on the street.
All right. How do you keep him in jail a long time, huh? You plan it on him, and then you send him to jail, and then he's out right away. Now what?
Lewellyn likely would have been eventually sent to prison for a long time, just like Refugio Cortez Ruiz. But we'll never know for sure. That's because in 2000, Juan Baby G Lewellyn was gunned down outside of his home after returning from a night of drinking at a nearby club. Because he was a member of the La Raza gang, his death was quickly written off by the media as the likely result of another gang feud in one of.
Buddy wasted his favor. He called them for a favor, said, how do we lock him up for a long time? They lock him up, he gets out on bail, and then they smoke him. What are you doing? You mad. Looking at each other like, I know you're going to smash my girl. Yeah, I know I'm going to smash your girl. But just don't smash my girl, all right? All right, I'm going to make sure that you don't know that I smash your girl. But I'm hoping you don't find out when I smash your girl. All right, thanks. All right, cool, hugs. And then it turns into this, put you away and then smoke you. Bananas.
of America's most violent cities. Saul's work as an informant continued to be lucrative. From 1996 to 2001, he made over $800,000 in public funds for his work as a paid informant, enough to make him technically one of the highest paid employees of the Chicago Police Department. But
you don't know a cop that legitimately made as much money as Saul did lining people up for the police. More money than any of those police chiefs, lieutenants, any of that shit.
This tax-free six-figure income, only supplemented by his work as a drug dealer, was not enough for Saul. So he hatched a bold plan, applying his insider knowledge of drug trafficking to form an even more devious result. He would form a squadron of gangsters, ex-cons, and drug couriers to kidnap high-risk targets who could supply millions in ransoms or stashed cocaine. And they would specifically target people with the power and resources to put Saul and his squad 6 feet under if they were ever found out, including local drug barons under the protection of the Sinaloa cartel. Saul's inner circle soon came to include guys like Fares Umar, another Chicago native who Saul knew from basketball gyms around town, or David Venegas, the husband of one of Saul's longtime drug and cash couriers, Lisette Venegas, who'd established mutual trust over the years. Then there were the Uriarte brothers, Hector, Jorge, and Manuel, a trio of guys with ties to the City Knights gang, who were so eager for access to Saul's underworld connections that Manuel had offered himself up as a hitman. But out of all of these folks, one man offered more knowledge and expertise than any others could have hoped to.
The big boss, Daddy. So, all right, he got his Avengers, and now they're going to get their Nick Fury, all right? This is their daddy right here.
This was because he knew better than the rest that the smoothest type of caper was one that didn't first appear to the victim to be a kidnapping or a robbery at all. His name was Officer Glen Lewellyn of the Chicago Police Department. Stash houses started getting hit. A home in Will County was taken for 80 kilograms of cocaine. Another on Kenneth Avenue in Chicago was hit for $1.5 million in drug money by men who burst in with police badges, vests, and guns and duct taped the occupants' eyes shut. The grandmother.
Once inside the van, one of the men placed duct tape over the top of the bag around victim F eyes and mouth. One of the men hogtied victim F by putting duct tape around his hands and feet and then tying his hands and feet together behind his back.
Of Saul's drug courier, Lisette Venegas, who was grabbed outside a bar she owned, hogtied and left.
So they hogtied her.
Without bathroom breaks, food, or water for 2 days until her family finally coughed up
Victim D and her family never contacted the police. Of course they didn't. Victim D was later told that her family paid a ransom of approximately $180,000 to the kidnappers.
$80,000 in ransom. Lisette was fully aware of the plot.
Lisette Venegas believed that her grandmother had $1 million hidden in the floor at her residence. Lisette Venegas approached Rodriguez about kidnapping her grandmother and holding her for ransom. So she's getting snatched up, she's getting hogtied, but she's in on it. She wants him to kidnap her grandmother so that they can extort her grandmother for the money that he wants. This is bananas.
And played along as her family stressed over the ransom demand.
While somebody was in the crib picking up floorboards, looking for money, looking like Tony Soprano's sister and shit with a metal or breaking down the walls looking for bread. Lisette Venegas' credibility was negligible. She lied to the family, including her husband, about her involvement in her own grandmother's kidnapping. And again, her husband was part of Saul's crew, but she still hasn't told her husband, who's part of the crew, that this is what's happening.
Not everyone escaped with their life. A drug supplier named Miguel de la Torre was lured to a parking garage near an apartment building owned by Saul, with the promise he'd be paid for some cocaine he'd fronted to him. Instead, he was hooked up to a car battery, burned, and eventually strangled when he refused to give up the name of his cocaine supplier, with his body left in the trunk of his Nissan and dumped in another part of town.
Jorge Uriarte, Manuel Uriarte, and Saul Rodriguez discussed where to leave Miguel's Nissan. Saul never saw Miguel's body after he had been illed. Saul Rodriguez understood that Jorge and Manuel had put his body in the trunk of the Nissan.
The local owner of a rim and tire shop was bear-hugged by a man posing as a homeless person, who forcibly dragged him into a van where he was blindfolded and taken.
They agreed that Fares Umar would dress like a homeless person and push a shopping cart down the alley behind Victim K's house at the time he would usually leave the house. Some people think, who's gonna go through all of that? Stop it. You didn't see the hitman that was dressed up like the Hasidic Jew? And he had the curls and the hat and everything, and he's under the hood of his car, and he's working on his car. He saw his mark come, ran up on the mark, ended him, and got out of Dodge. There's people that's willing to go that extra mile. There's dudes like Flores Umar that's willing to dress like a homeless person, push a shopping cart down the alley behind victim K's house at the time he would usually leave the house. Those guys exist. They're out there. All right? Don't think they're not. Those are the dudes that are willing to go the extra mile, put on the costume and everything.
Bear hugged by a man posing as a homeless person who forcibly dragged him into a van where he was blindfolded and taken to a garage. He spent days there, begging friends and fan where he was blindfolded and taken to a...
So if y'all watch Breaking Bad right here, this is Max Arciniega right here, tied up to the pole right here. This is my acting teacher. It's the homie right there.
Garage. He spent days there, begging friends and family for money, until his good buddy, Saul Rodriguez, came to the rescue. Saul had hung out at the victim's rim shop for years, and even offered to invest in it. Now here was Saul saving him from great bodily injury or death. The rim shop owner paid the rent.
A few hours later, Umar informed the rim shop guy that his friend was able to obtain the money and that after the money was counted, he would be released. After approximately 1 to 2 hours, Umar drove the rim shop guy to the area of Pulaski Avenue and Addison in Chicago. Umar then left the rim shop guy in a nearby alley.
Back to Saul through cash, wire payments, and property transfers over the next 3 years. They used these phony arrest ploys in other ways too. When someone in Saul's crew wanted to blow off a drug debt, they arranged for the person to be fake arrested in full sight of the loaner, ostensibly while he was coming back to pay back what he owed. But the loaner was not an easy dupe. Saul's response was to purchase a newer Crown Victoria and modify it to look like an undercover Chicago police car for them to use moving forward.
Yeah, I know I owe you like 50 grand, 100 grand. You know, we've been working together a long time. Don't worry about it. And then what happens is they say, okay, I decided I don't want to pay this guy no more. Daddy Lewellyn, go get him. It's the same thing they do in the cartel. Same deal.
In 2003, they'd used the Crown Victoria for one of their highest profile targets yet. They decided they would kidnap one of the twins.
Now they got a ghost whip. Now they got a ghost police car right here. But what y'all don't understand is that these were in the hood. With the light, with everything. I knew 3 or 4 people had this same whip. With the light, looked the same, all of that.
Chicago police car for them to use moving forward. In 2003, they'd used the Crown Victoria for one of their highest profile targets yet. They decided they would kidnap one of the twins. By then, Lewellyn had retired from the Chicago Police Department and started his own construction business. But he and Saul stayed in touch.
Constructing plans to kidnap old ladies, that was his business.
Saul knew Pedro and Margarito Flores from playing basketball with them at the Hoops gym in Chicago. They were hard men to track down. But Saul had guys in his circle who'd buy 20 to 30 pounds of cocaine from the twins directly, and he used random tidbits of information to his advantage. For instance, when one of Saul's business associates mentioned the twins had recently purchased brand new motorcycles, he passed this information on to the surveillance team to help locate exactly where their target resided.
Jorge Lopez explained that the twins had just bought motorcycles. Jorge Lopez gave Saul this information not knowing that he was going to use it to kidnap one of the twins. Glen Lewellyn, Umar, and Saul Rodriguez were already out conducting surveillance in the area of the twins' family's 3-flat apartment building on the south side of Chicago. Now, remember, this was his move. This was Saul's move. He would case the joint. You know, he'd sit around and watch. He'd get his information. You know, and he'd get your information. He'd sit around, watch your. If he wasn't doing it, somebody else was doing it. Watching your habits. Watch as you come and go, you know what I mean? We heard a story, I don't remember where it was, whether it was in Cartel Wives or we heard a story, it might have been Cartel Wives, where Cato snatched Buddy up out the car. He caught him on the block. When you got a police guy like Lewellyn that got your back, it's like, who really want to risk bodying you and kicking up that wasp's nest? Rather just try to thwart your maneuvers.
When Saul was planning his abduction, he was also helping the twins score tickets to an Oscar de la Hoya bout in Las Vegas. The kidnapping went off just like so many others. Pedro Flores was pulled over in his light blue Lexus and arrested, only to discover, once it was too late, that he was really the victim of an abduction. While he was being taken to a secure location, someone else was getting his Lexus off the middle of the street and parking it somewhere that it wouldn't attract attention. Saul monitored the situation from a distance, concerned that if he got too close to the hostage, that Pedro would recognize his voice and he would be exposed. Instead, Saul had Fares Umar call Pedro's family from payphones and gave him a script of what to say.
That's the guy that was telling Pete, man, you playing with your brother's life right now. I mean, telling Jay, you playing with your brother's life right now. But if that's the case, didn't Jay recognize Saul's voice? eventually he has to have gotten on the phone. Because if we listen, we're going to have to ask the twins about that next time we talk to him. Because if he recognized his voice, then somebody's story is off over here. If it was the Perez Umar guy. But again, he probably heard Perez Umar's voice but understood the play. Does this sound like a Saul play? Maybe. It could have been like that. Did his best friend dirty. Absolutely did his best friend dirty. If you could creep her, you could keep her. You know what I mean? Yeah, you betrayed me. Do I gotta end you over her? Nah. Do I gotta end you over the betrayal? Yeah, but I can end you in a million ways. You lose access to me. Done deal. But he wasn't ready. He tried to lock him up. He didn't get that done quick enough. That wasn't enough to fill the hole that dude left in his chest. So he smoked them. That's what best friends are for, evidently, in this game.
They told Margarito to leave a large amount of cocaine at a predetermined location.
Saul Rodriguez drove individual L to payphones in the Chicago area from which he made the ransom calls. Saul Rodriguez told both individual L and Perez Umar who to call and what to say,
while the surveillance team watched.
Whomever made the first call told Saul Rodriguez that victim G's twin brother had agreed to leave a large amount of brocaine and an amount of money in a van near First Avenue and Cermak or Roosevelt in the Chicago area.
From a distance. When this was done, the group readied themselves to drop Pedro off somewhere in Chicago until they tested the cocaine and realized they'd been given extremely low-quality drugs instead of the fish scale level that they were expecting. So, Perez Umar told Pedro to get on the phone and yell at Margarito, his brother, and tell him he wasn't taking the situation seriously enough. It worked. The group was eventually given 180 kilos of acceptable quality cocaine and made $750,000 from the sales, splitting the proceeds based on who had done what during the kidnapping. After it was all over, Saul, Pedro, and Margarito bumped into each other at the De La Hoya fight and had a cordial talk.
Not awkward at all. Twins run into this Muppet at the fights knowing what he did.
But the brothers suspected Saul and kept their eye on him from then on. Soon after their success with the twins, another victim was chosen. His name was Teodor Bueno, and the crew had pegged him as a local drug dealer.
I've never seen these mugshots right here. This definitely looks like Jay. A lot of facial hair, more facial hair than we're used to seeing, and the quality of the picture, this doesn't look so much like P. Quite possibly could be him, but I don't know. I ain't never seen these pictures.
Who'd make an easy shakedown.
What's up with the gun and the condoms on the floor, though? Come on, man. We got the magnums down here and the hammer. Stop it. What are we doing? What the hell kind of party y'all was having?
Rather than his normal crew, Saul decided to use David Venegas and a local bodybuilder named Charles Dewar.
So David Venegas, from my understanding, is the lady Lisette's husband that set up her grandmother to be kidnapped for ransom. Saul decided to use David Venegas and a local bodybuilder,
who'd die of a heart attack years later. Saul deviated from his usual go-to guys like the Uriarte brothers because he figured he could pay David and Charles less. This proved to be a regrettable choice.
When Perez cut corners. Instead of going with the Uriarte brothers who were tried and true and did their job and they were in the game with him and they did what they needed to do, he said, I got to go a little cheaper. He went with these two guys and it sounds like it was a problem.
Umar and the others attempted to pull Bueno into a minivan outside his Chicago home by disguising themselves as cops. Bueno's wife saw what was going on and rushed outside to help. The kidnappers told her it was, quote, police business. But she didn't buy that for a second. And
Umar informed the female that it was police business and to go back in the house.
Attempted to block the van in the driveway. They were eventually able to get away, but not until after she got a good enough look at the van to memorize a good description of it. Things continued to go wrong from here. After the initial abduction, Dewar decided he wanted nothing to do with this and simply walked away. Next, Bueno's wife informed the kidnappers that she'd been able.
That puts a target on his back. So the bodybuilder got in the mix. He was the cut corner. They paid him cheaper than the tried and true guys, the guys that have proven themselves. They botched the job. The wife saw the van. It turned into a whole thing. And then at the end of it, he didn't want no part of it and he walked away. Well, that puts a target on your back to get snatched up yourself. And I don't know if you got anybody that's willing to pay for you or you got any bread. Since you were the cheap work, you might just be expendable and end up in the trunk like Buddy did. She indicated that she could only get $500,000 during the next telephone call. Bueno's wife stated that she had obtained the money. Umar had a feeling that Bueno's wife had contacted law enforcement because she found the $300,000 in a short amount of time. As a result of being suspicious, Umar informed Bueno's wife that if he observed law enforcement while picking up the ransom money, Bueno would be unalive.
Able to come up with $800,000 in ransom within a few hours, a quickness that the kidnapping crew was unaccustomed to. Flores Umar was now worried that they were walking right into a trap, and even more so when on the way to collect the ransom, he noticed what he believed were numerous unmarked police cars. But Saul told him he was overreacting and urged him to plow ahead. Of course, Umar's suspicions were correct. When he arrived at the ransom drop, undercover cops made themselves known.
You gotta make sense. If you see cars, if you feel it's off, you bail. They didn't bail. That's that greed. That's that part that we talk about. The part where people say, man, Chapo on the phone call with Pete kind of sounded like he felt something strange. Why didn't he act on it? Greed. Same reason the guy that ran into Val in the restaurant was calling her all kind of cooperators and rats and this and that. And then Armando made it clear to him, hey, my brothers ain't testifying against nobody. Dude was like, all right, give me some work. That greed will make you do some shit that you don't want to do. Umar peeped it. He hired Umar to do a job, to be the eyes, to be the doer, the facilitator. And when the time came and he saw what he was supposed to see, what he was trained to see, the greed kicked in and said, nah, keep going. And they got popped off.
He was taken into custody after a short police chase. In an interview room, he lied to the cops, claiming Bueno owed him drug money and leaving Saul and David's names out of the whole thing. Saul returned the favor by posting Umar's bail, short police chase. In an interview room, he lied to the cops, claiming Bueno owed him drug money and leaving Saul and David's names out of the whole thing. Saul returned the favor by posting Umar's bail and purchasing him a lawyer. But Umar was no fool. He knew Saul well enough to know that these nice gestures were plan A to ensure Umar wouldn't talk. Plan B would obviously be to murder him. Because he was caught red-handed, he was sentenced to state prison for kidnapping, without ever implicating his accomplices. But Saul had other legal problems. Informants had told the DEA he was a cocaine dealer, and by 2006, the feds were zeroing in on a warehouse that Saul was renting from its owner, Glen Lewellyn. During the raid, Lewellyn asked the feds why they were there. When he found out it was Saul, he cut ties, repaid a $500,000 investment they'd jointly put into some real estate.
He did the Adam 22, washed his hands of the drama. They come down on Saul, they find him in a warehouse owned by Lewellyn, and Lewellyn starts shredding paperwork and documents.
And also allegedly used a DEA source to verify that Saul was being wiretapped, then warned him to get rid of his phone. By 2009, Flores Umar agreed
So he was still getting the help of Lewellyn. Lewellyn was washing his hands and shredding documents, but he was still pulling strings because he knew Saul go down, he go down. Saul ain't gonna hold the line for him.
Work with the DEA, signing an agreement that implicated
So
Saul.
boom, Umar finally flipped. Damn.
That Saul was being wiretapped, then warned him to get rid of his phone. By 2009, Flores Umar agreed to work with the DEA, signing an agreement that implicated Saul and other members of the crew in kidnappings, thefts, and murders. The following year, the U.S. Attorney's Office obtained an indictment against Saul, the Uriarte brothers, Glen Lewellyn, and others. Now Saul was in jail without bail, with about 20 different paths to a life sentence. So what do you suppose Saul did at this point, now that the feds had made their move? Once again, he decided to betray those closest to him. In an agreement with the feds, Saul admitted to 1 attempted murder, 14 kidnappings involving 29 victims.
Damn. Saul Rodriguez is the mastermind of this entire case. He's the moving force behind virtually all of the murders, kidnappings, robberies, and rug trafficking. Rodriguez's plea agreement sets forth criminal acts that he admitted to organizing and participating in. They include 3 unalivings, 1 attempt unaliving, 14 kidnappings involving 29 victims, the theft of 780 keys of brocane, and the theft of $2,783,500, not 5,000. Somebody added a zero that don't go there. Woo, that's a lot of people. 14 nappings involving 29 people. Nobody was safe. So if you were with your kid can get it too. If you were with your abuelita can get it too. If you were with your, whoever, they can get it too.
And the cumulative theft of 785 kilograms of cocaine. And
What did Lewellyn do? I don't remember. Lewellyn did like 8 years maybe, if that, before the judge came to rescue him because she was worried about his health. But were they worried about the kids and the old people that they kidnapped and tied up and put in basements and shit? You know what I'm saying?
$2,783,500 in cash. He also admitted to ordering the murders of his one-time best friend, Juan Levano, Miguel de la Torre, and a Latin Kings member named Michael Snoop Garcia, whom Saul arranged to be killed at the behest of a Satan's Disciples member whose brother Garcia allegedly ran over with a vehicle. In exchange for these admissions, Saul...
That sounds like a hit. That don't sound like no kidnapping, no extortion, none of that. That just sounds like a hit.
In exchange for these admissions, Saul was supposed to get a relatively lenient sentence, but he'd have to testify first. Of course, never satisfied with leaving things to chance, Saul decided to hedge his bets by obtaining a contraband cell phone and attempting to have a witness against him murdered from jail, all while maintaining his cooperation agreement with the federal government. Saul became the star witness at trial for 5 men who knew one another through Saul, had taken orders to commit violent crimes from Saul, but were now on the cusp of facing life in prison thanks to the testimony of Saul.
Damn, boy.
But as the trial progressed, it became clear he was just as much help to the defense as he was to the prosecution. His long record of lying, murdering, kidnapping, backstabbing, and being willing to do just about anything when his feet were to the fire made him easy fodder during cross-examination. Ultimately, almost none of the accusations that rested solely on Saul's testimony resulted in convictions. But there were enough supplementary witnesses to convict all 5 men of serious charges nonetheless, including Glen Lewellyn. While the jury was...
Look at him, big walrus face. And he probably still walks around. You know, he probably got like a little shrine to his police career up in his room. And you know, he looks at his old uniform and he salutes it in the morning. Like, yeah, man, you was good police. Come on, man. You was a baby snatcher, dog. You the scum of the earth.
Wasn't able to reach a verdict on counts of racketeering or kidnapping. They did convict the ex-cop of conspiracy to distribute cocaine, a charge that described Llewellyn's role in the conspiracy as being actively involved in robberies and kidnappings to seize cocaine and resell it. The final result of this case was without rhyme or reason. Many of the defendants received out-of-balance punishments that didn't fit their crimes. A man named Andres Flores admitted to 2 murders, kidnapping a band leader, his wife and kids during a home invasion, and major thefts of cocaine, but only got 14.5 years in prison because he cooperated. Jorge Uriarte, meanwhile, got 42 years for involvement in 8 kidnappings and allegations he participated in the murder of Miguel de la Torre. Another crew member named Tony Sparkman, who was one of the least involved members of Saul's crew, also got 42 years for conspiracy to distribute
the least involved got 42 years.
Cocaine. Even Judge Joan Gottschall, who presided...
Her? I hope they brought her up on charges because I feel like she let Lewellyn out on some, you know.
Over the case and handed down the sentences, thought they were unfair. Quote, "None of the sentencing makes any sense to me. I mean, we've got these people who strike me as incredibly dangerous to society who are going to get out of prison really soon." Then she brought up Faris Umar, noting that he had only 3 years left to serve, and how, quote, "very scary that was."
See, so she's sitting here throwing out football numbers, but for the judge, she was like, but it's too hard for him. He's too old. You know, we need him. He's not going to make it in prison. He's going to pass away. He's going to unalive from being sick because, you know, COVID. And she's like, what? Faris Umar getting out in 3 years after all this cooperation? Oh, hell no. We can't have that happen. He's a menace to society. No, lady, you're a menace to society.
As for Saul, it turned out that he tempted fate one too many times. While in jail, he accepted a $6,000 payment from the famous drug lord Vicente Zambada Niebla of the Sinaloa cartel. Money that Saul was paid for the whereabouts of Pedro Flores and Margarito Flores, so Zambada could have the relatives killed to discourage the Flores brothers from testifying against him. Unfortunately for Zambada, this plot not only failed, but the Flores twins are now minor celebrities, subjects of a successful podcast and a biographical TV deal involving 50 Cent, all due to their work taking down El Chapo and the other leaders of the cartel. After Saul's murder-for-hire deal with Zambada became known, the feds decided they'd had enough with Saul Rodriguez. They tore up his cooperation agreement, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison at a hearing where he blubbered and cried for 10 minutes, telling Judge Gottschall that he'd seen the light and, quote, didn't want to do bad no more.
I don't want to do bad things no more. I'm a changed man. I don't want to do bad things no more. I don't know what made me snatch up that abuelita and them babies. I don't know. I don't know what made me, you know, betray my best friend or I don't know why that woman was so important to me that I could end up taking his life because I was that empty inside. But I'm sure this guy will have a reason for everything.
But his performance took a hit when the sister of Juan Baby G. Lewellyn showed up to remind the judge and the public that Saul appeared just as sincere when he showed up to Lewellyn's funeral in 2000, crying and ostensibly mourning a murder that he had.
Oh, I'm gonna miss him so much. He was my best friend. He was always there for me when I needed him. We saved each other's lives so many times. All of that sob story. Wah, wah, wah. Then I'm bogus for not sympathizing? I don't sympathize. Rodriguez even had his best friend Juan Levano unalived after he began dating Rodriguez's ex-girlfriend. We read this already, but we'll read it again. And then showed up at the funeral acting like a mourner. No, we didn't read this. Prosecutors alleged. At Rodriguez's long-awaited sentencing hearing Friday, Levano's sister Angelica let Rodriguez know. She realized his duplicity the day of the funeral. How could you, Saul? She said in court. And he's over there, I don't want to be bad no more. I want to be a good boy. I'm never going to be greedy again. I'm over my insecurities overnight. I'm never going to be the lame that I was yesterday. I could turn this all around right now. I got this. Wah, wah, wah. Nah, bruh. The chickens came home to roost. You got away with it as long as you was going to get away with it. You know what I mean? It is what it is. All right, you're going to go to the funeral, go sit your ass in the corner and shut up. He was my friend. I loved him. He was my homie. Have a slip every now and then. How could he betray me? Like, what are we talking about here? But you'll never convince him of who he is. In order for a person to really embrace change and change who they are, they got to understand what they are or what they were. How could you change anything if you've never acknowledged what you become, what you are? Moving off of these feelings of inadequacy. Fuck out of here. And then, as soon as you lock them up, they're like, oh, can I have some water? And this pillow's not fluffy enough. And listen, you had an old lady and some kids hogtied. What do we care about your comfort? You buckling.
Ordered and profited from. As for Glen Lewellyn, after cutting ties with Saul, he had left Chicago for Las Vegas, where he found Jesus and became a church-going business.
See? Lewellyn was hiding behind Jesus. Definitely hiding behind Jesus. You can't tell me nothing different. Lewellyn was definitely hiding behind Jesucristo right here. He was praying every day real deep that they weren't going to come get his ass. And he's so arrogant and he's so privileged that when they got there, he was like, come on, that was 5 years ago. You think that's enough answer? Was that ever enough answer for somebody that you locked up, even if you locked them up legitimately? Was that ever enough answer for you? When you kidnap people, was it ever enough answer that, that happened a long time ago? No. Who do you think you are?
Where he found Jesus and became a church-going business owner with strong family ties, according to his...
He didn't find Jesus enough to turn himself in, right? Wouldn't that be the real change? Wouldn't that be the, I done found Jesus. I'm not going to be this dirty cop Lewellyn no more. I'm going to do better. I'm going to turn myself in and pay my debt to society. He didn't find Jesus that hard, right? Nah, he didn't find Jesus that hard.
Lawyers. Without directly admitting to any crimes or showing remorse, Lewellyn argued that his life in Chicago was behind him, and nothing was to be gained from locking up a man in his 50s.
Yeah, that's what he argued. I'm in Vegas now, man. My life in Chicago's behind me. That's the arrogance in him. That's the privilege in him that he could find the nerve to say that. In the long run, it worked. He served some time in prison, but then the judge, Gotcha, who didn't get nothing, she went and she bailed him out.
Health problems. Who was sure to be mistreated when he got behind bars.
You should have been mistreated when you got behind bars. You mistreated people.
Who was sure to be mistreated when he got behind bars, and people discovered who he was. Lewellyn was given 18 years in prison. But just 7 years into the sentence, he was granted an early release and set free due to health reasons. During his time of incarceration, he filed court papers claiming that his only true crime was involvement in illegal gambling, and that during trial, he was placed in a situation where he would have had to admit to gambling crimes in order to defend himself from the RICO charges. He made this argument unironically, as if betting on sporting events was the legal and moral equivalent of hog-tying and robbing cocaine traffickers alongside men who murdered people and flooded the streets with drugs. At any rate, Lewellyn is now in his late 60s and has stayed out of legal trouble since his release, nearly 4 years ago.
Since his release, when the judge came and rescued him and said he's too fat too drunk and dried out now because he's behind bars. He's dying inside, and we can't let him die on our watch. So we're gonna send him, his hairline, and his mustache back home. And I don't think he deserved that. I think he should have stood where he was at, because he wouldn't have had no mercy on nobody. He didn't have no mercy on nobody. He didn't even take his Jesus' mercy and go turn himself in when he found Jesus. So I don't get it.
We'll end this story with an update on the case of Refugio Cortez Ruiz.
Refugio, did you get out, bro? Come on, man. You too cool in that jacket, that shirt, that hat, and that beard to still be locked up, bro. I hope you free right now, man.
The man who was sentenced to 17 and a half years in prison after Lewellyn arrested him for possessing 10 kilos of cocaine in 1999. During the investigation, the true story behind Cortez Ruiz's arrest became known. While there were some definite indications that Refugio Cortez Ruiz was involved in cocaine, these new revelations about his arrest made the case unprosecutable. He was released from federal prison in 2009 after serving 10 years for a crime that federal prosecutors now admitted was built on the word of a man they no longer trusted.
10 years that you cannot give the man back. I don't care what you pay. Time is priceless. Time is priceless. Do we sell it every day? Absolutely. And you can't give him that back. All because this walrus right here was greedy. And that Muppet was greedy. And that they found the loopholes and the cracks in the system to manipulate their way into control of other people's lives to the point where they took 10 years away from Buddy that was living his life.
Refugio Cortez Ruiz later sued the city of Chicago and received a $400,000 settlement.
$400,000 for 10 years.
Less than half of what the city of Chicago had paid Saul Rodriguez as he robbed, kidnapped, murdered.
Ha! So the guy that you throw in jail wrongly gets less money in his settlement than the guy that lied to put him there. Banana.
And arranged for men to be framed. All while holding himself.
Beautiful city, though. A beautiful, murderous, deadly bitch is what she is. She'll betray you. She'll show you the world. She'll take you out. She'll bring you home. She'll knock you down. She'll pick you up. This city is a double-edged sword, a love-hate relationship. I love her and I hate her all at the same time equally.